They humiliated a waitress servant for fun, unaware she was protected by the emperor. When Emperor Marcus finally saw the dark, ugly bruises his loyal servant Elara was trying to hide beneath the worn sleeve of her tunic, his face remained a mask of stone. He said nothing. He offered no words of comfort, no flare of anger. He simply watched her. His eyes, which had condemned armies and rebuilt cities, traced the outline of the fingerprints on her skin. But the silent, chilling order he gave with nothing but a fractional glance to his most trusted advisor, Maximus, was a death sentence. It was an order that would systematically, intelligently, and completely destroy the wealthiest, most arrogant family in all of Rome. Because what the powerful, laughing Senator Cassius did not know, what he could not have possibly known as he entertained his guests, was that the emperor was listening. To understand how we arrived at this moment, we need to go back. The story of Senator Cassius's ruin and the fall of his entire house began just 1 hour earlier in the opulent, marble-lined chaos of the great banquet hall. The air in the hall was thick with the smell of roasted meats, spilled wine, and expensive perfumes. Hundreds of Rome's most powerful figures were gathered, their voices echoing off the vaulted ceilings painted with gods and heroes. They were the shapers of the world. The senators, the generals, and the wealthy landowners, all celebrating a recent military victory. And moving among them, invisible in her purpose, was Elara. Elara was not young, but she was not old. She was a woman defined by her competence. For 20 years she had served in the imperial palace, the last 5 as the personal attendant to the emperor himself. She was not a slave. She was a free woman, a paid servant, and her family had served his for generations. She had known Marcus when he was just a serious young man, long before the Senate declared him a god in waiting. She knew his preferences, which wine he favored, how he liked his scrolls arranged, and how to stay silent when he was deep in thought. Her entire professional life was a study in humility and efficiency. Her goal every night was to be unseen, to anticipate a need before it arose, and to glide through the chaos without making a single ripple. Tonight, the chaos was a tidal wave. The victory had made the guests rowdy, and none was more rowdy than Senator Cassius. Cassius was a mountain of a man, draped in robes of the most expensive purple dye, his fingers choked with gold rings. He was, as they said, new money. His family had made its fortune not through old honor, but through ruthless contracts, seizing control of the grain supply that fed the city. He was loud, he was arrogant, and he felt, quite rightly, that he was untouchable. He held power over the one thing even the emperor had to fear, the hunger of the mob. That evening, he was holding court in the center of the room, complaining loudly about a new tax policy. "It's madness," he boomed, his voice cutting through the din. "Marcus burdens the job creators," he spat the word, "to pay for more roads in the provinces. What do I care about a road in Gaul? My grain feeds Rome." This is when Elara entered his orbit. She approached his table with her heavy clay jug filled with the finest wine. Her job was simple: keep the cups full, stay low, and move on. She waited for a pause in his tirade, her eyes cast downward. "More wine, Senator," she murmured. Cassius barely looked at her. He slammed his heavy goblet down. "Fill it. And be quick, woman. Your betters are talking." Elara began to pour. The stream was steady, dark red, and precise. She had done this 10,000 times. But as she poured, one of Cassius's sycophantic friends laughed loudly at his joke and slapped the senator on the back. The blow jolted Cassius forward, his arm striking the jug Elara held. The heavy jug slipped, and a cascade of dark red wine flooded the table, splashing onto the senator's pristine white and purple robes. The hall, which moments before had been a roar, fell into a suffocating quiet. Every eye turned to the table. Cassius stared at the dark stain spreading across his chest. He looked at it for 1 second, 2 seconds. Then, very slowly, he raised his head. His face was purple with rage. He didn't look at his friend, who had pushed him. He looked at Elara. "You clumsy fool," he hissed. "Senator, my apologies," Elara said, bowing low, her voice trembling but professional. "It was an accident. Allow me to get a cloth." "Accident." Cassius roared, leaping to his feet. The chair crashed backward onto the marble floor. "You think you can ruin me and call it an accident? This robe is worth more than your entire bloodline. He was shouting now, performing for the room. This was not about wine. It was about power. It was about his complaint against the emperor, and here was one of the emperor's own servants, a perfect target for his rage. Senator, please. Elara began, her hands held up in supplication. Silence, he shouted. He grabbed her. He didn't just push her. He seized her upper arm in his massive, ring-covered hand. His fingers dug into her flesh like a vice. Elara cried out, a sharp gasp of pain. He dragged her forward, pulling her off balance. You are incompetent. You are nothing. You exist only because we allow you to. This is what happens when the emperor fills his halls with rabble instead of proper slaves. He was close to her face now, his own red with wine and fury. The other senators and guests just watched. Some looked away, embarrassed. Others smirked, enjoying the show. The palace guards, stationed at the walls, did not move. This was a senator. She was a servant. The power dynamic was absolute. This was not their fight. This was the system working exactly as designed. Cassius finally released her, shoving her backward. Elara stumbled, catching herself on the table, her entire arm throbbing with a fiery, deep pain. She knew, instantly, that the marks would be terrible. Humiliation burned her cheeks, hotter than the pain. She grabbed the empty jug, bowed her head, and fled the room, her composure broken, her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. She disappeared through the servants' archway, leaving the senator to soak in the applause of his friends as he called for a fresh robe. And in his private study, 2 floors above, the Emperor Marcus, who had left the banquet an hour prior, continued his work, completely unaware of the storm that had just broken in his own home. Elara fled to the cool stone quiet of the servants' pantry, her arm held tight against her chest. The sharp, fiery pain from Cassius's grip was already subsiding into a deep, sickening throb. But the physical pain was nothing compared to what she felt inside. It was the humiliation that burned. It was the feeling of being less than human, a piece of furniture to be kicked, an object for a powerful man to vent his frustrations upon. It was the silence of the room, the hundreds of eyes that watched, the guards who stood like statues. Their inaction was a confirmation of her status. She was, as the senator had shouted, nothing. She leaned against the stone wall, pressing her forearm against the cold surface, trying to will the swelling down. A younger servant girl, Anna, peeked around the corner. Elara, are you all right? What he did. Everyone is talking. I'm fine, Elara said, her voice strained, straightening up and pulling her composure around her like armor. It was a spill. These things happen. A spill, Anna whispered, looking at Elara's arm, which she was now cradling. But he grabbed you. I must get back to work, Elara said, cutting her off. She would not be the subject of pity and gossip. She went to a basin of water and splashed her face, the cold shocking the tears back. She looked at her reflection in the polished bronze shield a guard had left behind. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a shame she was trying to beat back. She looked down at her arm, carefully pushing back the sleeve of her tunic. It was already beginning to bruise. Dark, angry purple was blooming on her pale skin, a perfect, violent handprint. The impressions of the senator's heavy rings were pressed into her flesh like a brand. She quickly pulled the sleeve back down, her stomach turning. She had to hide this. If the emperor saw it, she wasn't afraid of being punished. She was afraid of what he would feel. She was afraid of bringing this ugliness, this shame, into his presence. Just then, a palace administrator entered the pantry. Elara, the nightly shipping manifests from Ostia have arrived. The emperor is in his study. He will need them for the morning briefing. A cold dread washed over her. No, not now. She couldn't see him. Not like this. Please, she said, her voice low. Can you not send Anna? The administrator frowned. The emperor was specific. The grain reports from Ostia are to be delivered only by you. He trusts your summary. Do not be long. Elara's heart sank. It was an order. She looked at her sleeve. It was hopeless. It wouldn't stay down. She tried to find another tunic, one with longer sleeves, but there was no time. She would simply have to be careful. She would hold the scrolls in her right hand, keep her left arm turned away. She would be in and out before he ever looked up. She walked through the quiet corridors, a world away from the banquet hall's roar. Here, the palace was a place of work, of silence and thought. She reached the heavy oak doors of the emperor's private study and knocked softly. "Enter," a calm voice called. She pushed the door open. The room was simple, almost Spartan, illuminated by a dozen flickering oil lamps. Scrolls were piled high on a massive wooden desk. Maps of distant provinces covered the walls. And at the center of it all sat Marcus, not in his imperial purple, but in the simple, unadorned tunic of a working magistrate. He was writing, a quill scratching softly on parchment. He did not look up. Elara moved quietly across the room, her left arm pressed tight to her side. She placed the heavy bundle of scrolls on the edge of his desk. "The shipping manifest from Ostia, my lord. The grain harvest from Egypt is up, but the Spanish shipment is delayed by storms." "Thank you, Elara," he said, his eyes still on his work. She bowed and turned to leave. She was almost at the door, her heart pounding with the relief of a clean escape. "Wait." Elara froze. She turned back, very slowly. Marcus was not looking at his desk. He was looking at her. His gaze was not angry or concerned. It was analytical. It was the same gaze he used to dissect a battle plan, searching for the flaw. "You are favoring your left arm," he stated. It was not a question. "My lord." Elara's face flushed hot. "The manifests," he continued, his voice quiet but carrying across the room. "They are heavy, yet you carried them all with your right hand. You held your left arm pressed against your body as if it were broken. You have been doing so since you entered the room." She instinctively tried to hide her arm behind her back, a small, guilty movement that confirmed his observation. "Show me your arm, Elara." His voice was soft, but it held the absolute authority of the legions. It was not a request. It was a command. "My lord, it is nothing, truly," she whispered, her eyes cast down. "Elara." He said her name, just her name. She hesitated, her body trembling. He was the emperor, but he was also Marcus, the boy she had known. Slowly, with a deep, crushing sense of shame, she brought her arm forward and, with her right hand, pushed back the worn sleeve. In the lamplight, the bruise was horrific. It was a perfect, dark purple handprint, stark against her skin. The circular imprints of Senator Cassius's heavy rings were clearly, deeply embedded in the swelling flesh. Marcus stood up. He walked around the desk until he was standing directly in front of her. He was close enough for her to see the flicker of the lamplight in his eyes. He did not touch her. He just stared at the injury, his face utterly, terrifyingly blank. To the rest of Rome, he was the emperor and she was a servant. But in that room, that dynamic was a lie. Marcus was not looking at a servant's injury. He was looking at the hand that had held a cold compress to his head when he had a fever as a boy. He was looking at the woman who, when his own mother was busy with imperial duties, had quietly brought him figs and told him stories of Cincinnatus, the farmer who saved Rome and sought no power. Her father had served his father. Her family was woven into the fabric of his, a thread of loyalty that ran deeper and truer than any political alliance in the Senate. She was not just staff. She was home, and her pain was his. His voice, when he finally spoke, was so quiet Elara had to strain to hear it. It was a voice of ice. "Who did this to you?" This was the moment Elara had dreaded. She saw the storm gathering in his eyes, and she knew who Cassius was. He controlled the grain. He held the lifeblood of the city. An open conflict with Cassius would mean riots, famine, political chaos. She believed, in her heart, that she was protecting Marcus from a fight he could not afford. She pulled her sleeve down, her eyes flooding with tears of shame. "My lord, it is nothing," she lied, her voice thick. "I was clumsy. I fell against a wine rack in the cellar. I am so ashamed to have bothered you with it." She lied, and she lied badly. A wine rack does not leave the imprint of a hand. A wine rack does not wear rings. Marcus watched her face for a long moment. He saw the lie, and more importantly, he saw the why. He saw her fear, not for herself, but for him. She, a servant, was protecting him, the emperor, from a corrupt senator. She believed Cassius was more powerful than the throne. This lie, this selfless, misguided, protective lie, was the final signature on the senator's death warrant. Marcus turned away from her, walking back to his desk. His face was calm again, the mask of the emperor fully restored. "You are a poor liar, Elara. You always were." His voice was almost gentle, the ice gone. "Go to the palace physician. Have him look at that. Take the next 2 days to recover. That is an order." "My lord, I am fine, I can work." "That is an order," he repeated, his back still to her, his voice final. "Yes, my lord." She bowed deeply and quickly fled the room, leaving Marcus in the silence. From the shadows by the wall, Maximus stepped forward. He was a broad, scarred bull of a man, the prefect of the emperor's guard, who had been Marcus's personal centurion on the German frontier. He had been standing there, silent, the entire time, watching everything unfold. "She thinks he is untouchable," Marcus said, his voice flat and motionless. "She thinks I should be afraid of him." He picked up a small Iron Legionnaire's token from his desk. "Maximus," he said, "I want the name." "Officially." Maximus closed his fist around it. "I already know it," he replied, his voice a low gravel. "Senator Cassius. In the Great Hall 1 hour ago." He did it in front of 50 witnesses. Marcus nodded slowly, his eyes dark, staring at the map of Rome on his wall. "The Great Hall," he repeated, his voice barely a whisper. "He did this in my home." Maximus stood unmoving, his fist still clenched around the Iron Legionnaire's token, his scarred face grim in the lamplight. He had served Marcus on the frozen banks of the Danube, had seen him make decisions that cost thousands of lives to save tens of thousands. He was a man of brutal pragmatism. And this, what he sensed Marcus was about to do, was a dangerous indulgence. "My lord," Maximus began, his voice a low rumble, "you must understand what this man truly is. Cassius is not just a senator. He is not just a loud-mouthed fool in a purple robe. He is the grain supply." Maximus stepped toward the massive wall map of the Mediterranean, his thick finger tapping the port of Ostia, then Alexandria, then Carthage. "He doesn't just sell grain," Maximus continued, his tone urgent. "He is the Annona itself. He owns the ships that bring the harvest from Egypt. He owns the docks at Ostia where they unload. He owns the river barges that haul it to the city. He owns the warehouses in Trastevere where it is stored. The banks that finance the merchant fleets, they are his partners, or they are in his debt. He doesn't just control the grain, Marcus. He controls the bread. And in this city, he who controls the bread controls the mob." Marcus said nothing, his back still to the room, his gaze fixed on the map. Maximus pressed on, laying the full, ugly truth of the political board bare. "This is the complication, my lord. If you move against him directly, if you arrest him, if you seize his property, he will give one order. The shipments will stop. The price of bread will triple by noon tomorrow. By the 3rd day, the city, our city, will be starving, and a starving city riots. This is not a man you can simply arrest. This is a king in all but name, and he knows it. He built his power this way precisely, so he would be untouchable, even by you." Before Marcus could respond, there was a soft knock at the door. A palace intelligence agent, one of the emperor's network of eyes and ears, slipped into the room. His face was pale with urgency. "My lord," the spy whispered, his eyes darting between Marcus and Maximus. "A report from the banquet hall. Senator Cassius. He just made a toast." Marcus turned his head, his eyes cold. "Go on." "He stood," the agent said, swallowing hard. "He raised his cup and he was drunk, my lord, but his words were clear. He toasted to Rome, a city of lions, strong enough to withstand any threat, be it Germans at the border or incompetence from within." The spy continued, he said, "May we always have the strength to purge the weak, lest their clumsiness infect us all." The room, his allies, my lord, they laughed. They cheered him. He was looking at the wine stain on his robes as he said it. It was a message, my lord. To you, about your servant." The agent bowed and retreated from the room, leaving the words hanging in the air like poison. So Cassius had not just assaulted a servant. He had done it in the emperor's home, and now he was publicly mocking the emperor's authority, daring him to respond, confident that his control of the grain supply made him invulnerable. He was flaunting his power. Maximus let out a slow, heavy breath. This is the escalation. He is goading you, Marcus. He is telling the Senate you are weak. He wants you to act so he can unleash the mob and prove he is the true power in Rome. This was the test. The true, agonizing test of an emperor. It was the peace of 1,000,000 lives versus the pain of one loyal woman. The cold, hard logic of statecraft was clear. Do nothing. Censure him in private. Swallow the insult, as Elara had been forced to swallow her pain for the greater good. The system was designed to protect men like Cassius. The system demanded that Marcus let this go. Maximus saw the internal war in his friend's rigid shoulders. Marcus, he said, his voice softening the city. The people. 100,000 will be in the streets. Is this one woman, is her honor, worth the stability of Rome? And there it was. The moment Elara had tried to prevent with her lie. She, a servant, had tried to protect the emperor from this exact choice. She believed he was powerless against the system. Cassius believed he was the system. They were both wrong. Marcus turned, his face calm, but his eyes were not the eyes of a politician. They were the eyes of the general on the eve of battle. He did this to her, Marcus said, his voice quiet, because he believes I am afraid of him. He believes the grain makes him emperor and me his clerk. He believes the system protects him. He paused, walking back to his desk. He is right about one thing. To attack the grain supply is to attack Rome. It would cause chaos. It would be imprecise. Maximus nodded, a wave of relief washing over him. Good. Then we will let this pass. We will find another way. A private censure. A heavy fine, perhaps? No, Marcus said, cutting him off. The word was flat, absolute. You misunderstand me, Maximus. We will not attack the grain supply. The grain supply is a Roman asset. It does not belong to him. It belongs to the people. We are not going to destroy it. He looked up and a cold, thin smile touched his lips. We are going to transfer it. Maximus stared, confused. Transfer it? How? His men, his ships, his contracts. Contracts, Marcus repeated, tapping the stack of manifests Elara had delivered. You said it yourself. He thinks his power comes from the grain. He is wrong. His power comes from debt. It comes from permits. It comes from paper. His entire empire is a house of parchment. This was the decision. This was the vow. Not hot-blooded, brutish revenge, but a cold, systemic execution. You will not send a single soldier, Marcus commanded, his voice gaining that iron edge Maximus knew so well. You will not draw a single blade. An assassination is messy. It makes him a martyr and it proves his point. It is inelegant. This, Marcus said, his gaze hardening, will be an education. We will use the very system he holds hostage. We will use his own tools against him. We will dismantle him so quietly that he won't even know he's dead until he tries to stand up. Maximus, the emperor ordered, I want every contract, every loan agreement from every banker in the city, every shipping manifest tied to his name. I want the prefect of the vigiles, the city watch. His warehouses are built of wood, aren't they? They must be a terrible fire risk. I want the curator Anoni, the grain administrator. I am suddenly deeply concerned about the purity of his supply. We will not stop the grain from flowing. We will simply change the name on the ledger. He picked up a blank scroll, a declaration of war more final than any bronze tablet. He built an empire of paper, Marcus said, his voice dropping to a whisper. And by the gods, Maximus, by dawn I want to watch it burn. Within an hour, the emperor's study had been transformed. It was no longer a place of quiet contemplation. It was a war room. But the men summoned were not generals. They wore no armor and carried no swords. They were the true, unseen gears of the Roman state, the administrators. 2 men stood before the emperor's desk, summoned from their beds. The first was Servius Galba, the prefect of the vigiles, the head of the city watch. He was a broad, practical man, a former engineer who saw Rome not as a city, but as a complex machine of aqueducts, sewers, and, most importantly, flammable tenements. His entire life was a war against Rome's greatest enemy, fire. The second man was Lucius Volsinius, the curator Annoni, the administrator of the grain supply. He was the opposite of Galba, thin, pale, and precise. His world was not fire and water, but ledgers, stamps, and seals. He was the most powerful bureaucrat in the city, the man who signed the permits that allowed the grain to move from ship to barge, from barge to warehouse, from warehouse to the bakeries. They both looked exhausted and deeply confused about why they had been dragged from their beds in the middle of the night. "My lords," Marcus began, his voice calm and level, "you are here because I have a grave concern. A matter of public safety and state security. I am concerned about Senator Cassius." Galba, the practical watchman, spoke first. "Concern, my lord? How? His warehouses? I can have a cohort of my vigilas stationed there by sunrise if there's a threat of unrest." "The threat, Prefect Galba, is not to the warehouses. The threat is the warehouses," Marcus said. He turned to the grain administrator. "Lucius Volsinius, you are the man who signs the permits. Tell me, how much of Rome's daily bread is currently under the seal of Senator Cassius?" Volsinius's thin fingers twitched. "My lord, as you know, the senator is not just a supplier. He is the supply chain. Through his own holdings and his network of associates, I would estimate he controls 80% of the grain currently in the city and 90% of the shipments due in the next moon. To be blunt, Caesar, Rome eats because Cassius allows it. He is untouchable," Galba added, stating the simple fact. "To move on him is to starve the city. It is unthinkable." This was the wall Elara had seen, the wall Maximus had seen, the wall Cassius had built around himself, using the city's own hunger as a shield. Marcus smiled, a cold, thin, terrifying smile. "Unthinkable," he repeated. "Yes, it is unthinkable to stop the grain. It is unthinkable to arrest him. It is unthinkable to do what he expects. We are not barbarians, gentlemen. We are not going to burn his property or put a knife in his back. That is clumsy." He leaned forward, his voice dropping into a conspiratorial whisper, a sound meant only for the three men in that room. "We are not going to destroy a single thing. We are going to enforce the law." The two administrators stared, their confusion deepening. Marcus looked directly at Galba, the fire chief. "Prefect, your men are responsible for fire safety, are they not? Cassius's main warehouses, the ones by the Tiber, they are old. Very old. Made of wood, are they not?" Galba nodded slowly. "Yes, my lord. They are a known hazard. But he has exemptions. From the Senate. An exemption from the Senate," Marcus mused, "is a political document. But an order from the emperor regarding public safety is a sacred duty. I have had a vision, Prefect, a nightmare, of fire, of those warehouses going up like a torch and the flames spreading to the tenements of the poor. I cannot sleep for fear of it." Galba's eyes widened, a flicker of understanding crossing his face. "My lord, I want a full top-to-bottom safety inspection," Marcus ordered, his voice now crisp and sharp. "Of every warehouse, dock, and silo owned or leased by Senator Cassius. You will take 300 of your men. You will go now, at this hour. You will check every beam for woodworm, every oil lamp for stability, every grain barrel for proper spacing. You will check their firefighting equipment. Do they have the proper number of water buckets? Are their axes sharp? Are their ladders sound?" He leaned in. "I want you to be meticulous, Prefect. I want you to be the most thorough, pedantic, rule-obsessed inspector in the history of Rome. Find every violation. And when you do, you will not issue a fine. You will place the emperor's seal upon the door. You will declare it a public hazard, and you will shut it down. Every last one of them." Galba's practical mind saw the genius of it. It was legal. It was nonviolent. It was perfect. "And if they pass inspection, my lord?" Marcus's cold smile returned. "They won't." He turned to the second administrator. "Lucius Volsinius," the emperor said, his voice softer now. "The grain, the annona, it is a sacred trust. The people of Rome believe the grain that bears the state seal is pure, that it is the best." Can you personally guarantee the purity of the Cassius supply? Volsinius hesitated. My lord, the volume is immense. We sample, but to check every sack. I have received an anonymous and deeply troubling report, Marcus said, his face a mask of imperial concern. A report of contamination, of weevils, of rot, in shipments originating from Egypt, all tied to the senator's shipping line. It would be a catastrophe, Lucius, if this rot were to spread to the imperial reserve. It would be treason to know of a threat and to do nothing. Volsinius's blood ran cold. He saw the trap. My lord, what are you ordering? An audit, Marcus said simply. As of this moment, every ship, every barge, every wagon bearing the seal of Cassius is quarantined. Nothing unloads at Ostia. Nothing moves up the Tiber. Every single sack must be opened, inspected for weevils, tested for moisture, and personally resealed by your men. I know you are thorough, Lucius. I trust this process will take some time. Weeks, perhaps. Volsinius's knees felt weak. He was being ordered to strangle the grain supply legally. Cassius's ships would rot in the harbor. His grain would rot in the barges. His cash flow would stop. Not in a month. Not in a week. Today. This will cause panic, my lord, Volsinius whispered, terrified. The price will not move, Marcus countered, his voice like iron. Because at the exact same moment you quarantine his supply, you will open the imperial reserve, the grain I control. You will flood the market, at half price if necessary. The people will not starve. They will call me their savior. They will call Cassius a poisoner. The plan was laid bare. It was a pincer movement, executed not by legions, but by firemen and clerks. One would freeze Cassius's assets on land. The other would freeze his assets at sea. Go, Marcus commanded. You have your orders. By sunrise, I want the seals on those doors. I want the inspectors on those ships. The two men, awed and terrified, bowed low. It will be done, Caesar. They backed out of the room, their minds racing, leaving the emperor alone with his guard. Maximus watched them go. He let out a low whistle. You have just weaponized the rules, my lord. You've tied his entire fortune up in paperwork. It's the clean part of the plan, Maximus, Marcus said, walking to the window, looking out over the slumbering city. It stops his cash flow. It ties up his assets. It humiliates him. But it doesn't ruin him. Not yet. A man like Cassius has reserves. He has bankers. He will simply wait for the inspections to end, pay the fines, and bribe his way back to power. He turned from the window, his eyes dark. Phase 1 is the bureaucracy. It's the anvil. Now we must prepare the hammer. What is the hammer? Maximus asked. His debt, Marcus said. While our administrators are tying up his products, you and I are going to hunt down his bankers. Every man in this city who holds a note on him, I want to know who they are. Because by the end of the week, I intend to own every single one of them. Senator Cassius awoke in his private villa on the Quirinal Hill, a world away from the grit and noise of the city. His head throbbed, a dull axe blow of a hangover from the banquet. But as his eyes focused, he smiled. It was the smile of a predator who had just made a successful kill. He felt triumphant. He had put that clumsy servant in her place, and in doing so had sent a clear, undeniable message to her master. He had publicly mocked the emperor in his own hall, and the emperor had done nothing. Because he could do nothing, he had proven, to himself and to the 50 most powerful men in Rome, who truly held the power. He was untouchable. He clapped his hands, the sound echoing in his marble-floored bedchamber. Wine, he bellowed, and my ledgers. I have a city to run. A young slave scurried in, his hands trembling as he poured the watered-down morning wine. Cassius took the cup, draining it in one gulp. He was about to ask for his port manager when the man himself burst into the room, unannounced, his face the color of wet parchment. Titus, Cassius barked, annoyed at the breach of protocol. What is the meaning of this? You look like you've seen a ghost. Has a ship sunk? Titus, the port manager, was panting, his clothes damp with the morning fog from the Tiber. My lord, it's Ostia. The fleet from Alexandria. Our 3 biggest grain ships. They're quarantined. Cassius's smile faded. Quarantined? Don't be a fool. I paid the harbor tax. What pestilence are they claiming? Not pestilence, my lord, Titus stammered, his eyes wide with fear. Weevils. Rot. Lucius Volsinius, the curator, he's there himself. He's blockaded the harbor. He says he's acting on a direct imperial order. He's inspecting every ship, my lord. Every single sack. He says it's for public safety. He says it could take a month. Cassius stared. A month? The blood drained from his face. A month meant his cargo would rot in the holds. A month meant his contracts would be void. A direct imperial order. He repeated. This was not a coincidence. This was the Emperor. He felt a flash of rage, but not yet fear. It was a petty, spiteful little jab. He thinks he can annoy me. Cassius snarled. The fool. He thinks he can cut off my sea route? Fine. The city doesn't live on future grain. It lives on what is in my warehouses. Titus, send a message to every baker in Rome. As of noon, the price of my grain doubles. We will see who the people blame when their children go hungry. We will see how long Marcus's public safety lasts with a mob at his gate. He was shouting, triumphant again. He's just proven my point. He needs me. My lord. A new voice. A second man, his chief warehouse administrator, ran into the room, colliding with Titus. This man was not just pale. He was weeping. Master, the warehouses, they're gone. Cassius felt a cold spike of dread, a feeling so foreign he almost didn't recognize it. Gone? What do you mean gone? Burned. Sealed, the man cried, pulling at his hair. Prefect Galba, the fire chief. He came before the dawn. He brought 400 men. Not soldiers, my lord, inspectors. They swarmed us. They said the support beams were rotted. They said we didn't have enough water buckets. They said our ladders were a threat to the stability of the state. Get to the point, you idiot. Cassius roared. Galba has placed the Emperor's seal on every door, the man wailed. On all 12 warehouses. He declared it a public hazard. Nothing can go in, and nothing, my lord, nothing can come out. It's illegal to even break the seal. It's treason. The wine cup slipped from Cassius's hand and shattered on the marble floor. He couldn't breathe. It was a pincer. A coordinated, brilliant, suffocating pincer. His ships were trapped at sea. His grain was trapped on land. His entire operation, the work of 2 generations, had been frozen solid. Paralyzed. In less than 3 hours, he stumbled to his balcony, his mind racing. The price, he stammered, grabbing the second man by the tunic. The markets. The price must be... The city, they must be rioting now. They must be screaming for bread. The warehouse manager looked at him, his face a mask of utter defeat. No, my lord. There are no riots. What do you mean? Cassius whispered. The moment our warehouses were sealed, the Emperor opened the imperial granaries, the Horia Agrippiana. All of them. He's flooding the city with his grain. He's selling it for half price. Cassius staggered back, clutching the stone railing of his balcony. The pieces slammed into place in his mind. The audits, the inspectors, the seals, the imperial grain. It was not a random series of misfortunes. It was not a petty political jab. It was a plan. A cold, complex, and perfectly executed plan. He wasn't just being punished. He was being replaced. The mob wasn't screaming his name in anger. They were screaming Marcus's name in praise. He was their savior. And Cassius. Cassius was the man who had tried to poison them with weevils and house their bread in fire traps. He wasn't just ruined. He was the villain. He sank to his knees on the cold marble, the hangover forgotten, replaced by a pure, icy terror. His mind raced, desperately trying to understand what he had done to deserve this. The tax policy, his speech, it was impossible. This was too vast, too total. Why? He whispered to the empty air. Why? What did I do? And then, in his mind's eye, he saw it. Not the Emperor's face. Not the Senate. He saw a plain, invisible woman. He saw a splash of red wine. He felt the grip of his own hand, his rings digging into soft flesh. He heard a small, sharp cry of pain. He saw the bruise. The servant, he breathed, his voice choked with disbelief. The servant. It was the nothing. The invisible woman. The rabble he had insulted. He had grabbed a mouse, and the god Jupiter had answered. He had been so busy watching the throne, he had never seen the shadow standing behind it. He was not fighting a politician. He was fighting a man. And that man was defending his home. A new, frantic energy seized him. "Get out," he screamed at his men. "Get out. I have to see my bankers. Now." Maximus entered the study, his face grim but satisfied. "It is done, my lord. Phase 1 is complete." He unrolled a small scroll on the emperor's desk. Prefect Galba's men have sealed all 12 warehouses. The emperor's seal is on every door. A public hazard notice posted for all to see. Prefect Valsinius has quarantined the entire Cassius fleet at Ostia. His report on the contaminated grain is already circulating in the Senate. Maximus allowed himself a small, grim smile. "The city, as you predicted, is calm. The people are calling you Marcus the Provider. The imperial grain is flowing, and your name is being praised at every bakery. As for Cassius, he is a pariah. His name is being cursed as a hoarder and a poisoner. He is humiliated. He is crippled. He is finished." Marcus looked up from the map he was studying. His eyes were tired, but his voice was as sharp as forged steel. "No," he said simply. "He is not." Maximus frowned. "My lord, we have cut off his entire income. He is bleeding coin from every pore. He cannot move his product. He cannot pay his men. He is frozen," Marcus interrupted, standing up. "He is not dead. A man like Cassius does not build an empire on grain alone. He builds it on favors, on promises, and on debt. Right now, he is a wounded bear. He is dangerous. He still has allies. He still has friends in the Senate who owe him money, or to whom he owes money. And most importantly, he has bankers. This was phase 2. The bureaucratic attack was the anvil. This was the hammer. The bankers, my lord?" Maximus asked. "Surely they will abandon him. His collateral is worthless." "Exactly," Marcus said. "His collateral, the ships, the warehouses, the grain, is worthless today because I have sealed it. But what if I unseal it tomorrow? What if this is just a dispute? The bankers are powerful, Maximus. They are a brotherhood. They have loaned Cassius millions. If he defaults, they are ruined. They will not let him fail." Marcus began to pace, his mind laying out the next moves in this silent, financial war. "This is what Cassius is doing right now," he said, as if seeing it in a vision. "He is racing to his bankers. He is begging them to cover his losses, to give him a new loan. He is promising them that this is just a political spat. He will ask them to circle the wagons, to hold his debt, to give him time to bribe his way back into my good graces. And they will," Maximus concluded, seeing the problem, "because they cannot afford to let him fail." "They cannot afford to let him fail," Marcus agreed, "if they believe he can be saved. Our job, Maximus, is to make them believe he is already a corpse. We must make his debt so toxic, so radioactive, that they will not try to save it. They will try to survive it." Marcus pointed to a separate, smaller list on his desk. It was not a list of warehouses. It was a list of 6 names, the 6 most powerful private bankers in Rome. While Galba and Valsinius were sealing his property, Marcus explained, my other agents, the ones who move in the financial world, were spreading a different kind of plague. A rumor whispered in the right ears, not for the public, but for the bankers. "What rumor?" Maximus asked. "That this is not a safety inspection. That this is not a political dispute. That this is a proscriptio," Marcus said, using the terrifying, ancient word for a state-declared enemy. "The rumor is that the emperor has declared Cassius an enemy of Rome, that his property is not just frozen, but will be permanently seized by the imperial treasury by the end of the week. That his name is to be erased." Maximus's blood ran cold. A prescription was a death sentence, financially and often literally. "The bankers," Marcus continued, his voice chillingly precise, "are now in a panic. They are not thinking about saving Cassius. They are thinking about saving themselves. They are staring at loan agreements that are now, suddenly, backed by nothing, by assets that are about to be seized by me. That paper is worthless. They are holding a fire in their hands, and they are desperate to drop it. They will be desperate, Maximus realized, to sell that debt. To anyone. For anything. To get even one coin back on the dollar before it becomes zero. Precisely, Marcus said. He unrolled a third scroll, this one containing a complex web of names. Companies in Alexandria, trading groups in Gaul, shipping magnates in Syria. And this is where you come in, my friend. You will not go as the prefect of my guard. You will mobilize our shadow agents, the foreign businessmen who are on my payroll. These shell companies, they are unknown. They have no ties to me. He looked at Maximus, his orders clear. They will approach each of those 6 bankers separately today. They will not go as predators. They will go as vultures, offering a kindness. They will say they heard about this toxic debt, that it's worthless, but as a gesture of goodwill, they are willing to take it off the banker's hands. For, say, 10 cents on the sestertius. Maximus saw the genius of the final, brutal stroke. The bankers, they won't even negotiate, he breathed. They will weep with gratitude. They will see it as their only way out. They will sell instantly to save themselves from total ruin. And by nightfall, Marcus concluded, every note he has signed, every loan he has taken, every financial chain he used to build his empire will be bought up by a dozen different foreign entities. Who are all? Maximus finished, secretly you. The trap was total. Cassius was not just frozen. He was not just humiliated. He was about to be owned. Go, Marcus ordered. Get it done. I want to own him. Soul and ledger. By the time the sun sets, when he begs for help, I want every banker in the city to tell him, I am sorry, Senator, but your debt has been sold. The morning was a blur of mounting terror for Senator Cassius. He had flown from his villa, carried in his litter by his fastest slaves, not to the Senate, not to the Forum, but to the one place in Rome where power was more real than legions, the banking houses on the Aventine Hill. He was still telling himself this was salvageable, a misunderstanding, a political overstep. He just needed liquidity. He needed his bankers. They were his partners. They were his friends. They had built this empire with him. He burst into the offices of his primary banker, Decimus, a man with whom he had shared wine just 3 nights ago. The clerks, who usually bowed and scraped, looked at him with a strange, cold pity. Decimus, Cassius yelled, pushing past an attendant. Thank the gods. You've heard, I assume? This madness? This imperial tantrum? Decimus was standing by his window, his back to the room. He did not turn. It's a temporary problem, Decimus, I assure you, Cassius said, his voice a desperate, forced imitation of his old confidence. Marcus is posturing. He's made his point. I just need a short-term loan to cover my payroll, to show the market I am still strong, just until this inspection blows over. He can't keep my assets sealed for long. The Senate will. He can, Decimus said, his voice flat, dead. What? Cassius stopped. Decimus turned. His face was not angry. It was not sympathetic. It was the face of a surgeon who had just lost a patient. It was a face of pure financial grief. He can keep them sealed as long as he likes, Decimus said. Because they are not just sealed, Cassius. They are seized. The word is already out. This is a prescription. You are an enemy of the state. Cassius felt the floor drop from beneath him. Prescription? That's a lie. A rumor. It's absurd. I am a senator of Rome. He would need a trial, a decree. He doesn't need a decree when he has the rumor of one, Decimus said, his voice cold. To the market, the rumor is the decree. Your assets, the grain, the ships, the warehouses, they are worthless. As of an hour ago, they are no longer collateral. They are liabilities. So help me. Cassius begged, his arrogance shattering, revealing the terrified man beneath. You must. We are partners. If I fall, you fall. The loans you gave me. The loans, Decimus said, walking to his heavy wooden desk, are no longer my concern. What does that mean? Decimus opened his ledger. A consortium of Syrian spice merchants approached me this morning. They heard about your troubles. They saw the value in the ships themselves, even if the grain is lost. They made me an offer. An offer? Cassius whispered. They offered to buy your debt, Decimus said, not meeting his eyes. All of it. For 10 cents on the sestertius. 10 cents. Cassius was numb. It was a gift, Cassius. Decimus suddenly yelled, his composure breaking, his own terror showing. It was charity. By noon, that debt would have been worth 0. I have a bank to run, a family. I took the deal. I had to. I cut the infection out before it killed the body. I am sorry, Senator, but your debt is sold. Who? Cassius whispered. Who bought it? Which consortium? I don't know, Decimus said, turning back to the window. I didn't ask, and they didn't say. Please, Cassius, leave. You are bad for business. The sun was now high in the sky. Maximus stood by the desk as a procession of 6 men, one by one, entered the study. These were not bankers. These were the shadow agents, the disguised Syrian spice merchant, the Gallic wine trader, the Alexandrian shipping magnate. Each one was a different face, a different nationality, a different front company. And each one, in turn, placed a small, rolled-up bundle of parchment on the emperor's desk. Maximus picked one up. It was a loan agreement, a note for 5 million sestertii, signed in Cassius's own arrogant, flowing hand. Decimus sold, the first agent said. He was grateful. As did the House of Gallus, said the second. He called it a divine rescue. One by one, they made their reports. The hammer had fallen 6 times. When they were gone, Marcus and Maximus were left alone with the pile of scrolls. This was it. This was the entire financial architecture of the House of Cassius. Every loan, every mortgage, every bond. It's done, Maximus said, his voice filled with awe. It's all here. You own him. You own his houses, his ships, his companies. You own every coin he has ever borrowed. Yes, Marcus said. He picked up one of the scrolls, unrolling it, looking at the senator's signature. Meanwhile, Cassius was staggering through the Roman Forum. He had been to all 6 banks. The story was the same at every one. Sold. A group of Egyptian traders. We had to. Sold. It was not a coincidence. It was not a panic. It was an acquisition. He stood in the center of the bustling forum, the world swirling around him, and he finally saw the full, horrifying picture. The quarantine, the seals, the imperial grain, the rumors of proscription, the financial panic, the mysterious foreign buyers who all appeared at the exact same moment. It was not 6 different buyers. It was one. It was not a Syrian consortium or an Egyptian trader. Cassius breathed, his voice catching in his throat, a sound of pure, soul-shattering terror. He didn't just freeze my assets. Cassius realized. He created the panic to devalue my debt, so he could buy it for nothing. He fell to his knees, right in the mud of the forum, heedless of the senators and merchants who stared and pointed at the man who, just yesterday, had been a king. He had not just been beaten. He had not just been ruined. He had been consumed. He was now, in every legal and financial sense, the personal property of the man whose servant he had dared to touch. Marcus rolled the scroll back up. Maximus looked at the pile of debt. My lord, he said, his voice low, what are your orders? Shall I call in the notes? Seize his properties now. Have him arrested? Thrown in the Mamertine? Marcus shook his head. He looked up at Maximus, his face as calm as a winter lake. No, the emperor said. He is not a common criminal. He is a senator. He deserves a certain respect. A formality. He picked up a fresh piece of parchment and a quill and dipped it in the ink. Maximus, he said, you will send a messenger to his villa, not a soldier, a clerk. Have him deliver this note. What does it say, my lord? Marcus began to write, his hand steady. It says, the emperor replied, his voice a soft, silken whisper. Senator Cassius, I find myself in possession of certain financial documents bearing your signature. I believe we have matters to discuss. Be at my private study at sunset. And Marcus paused, adding a final, chilling line. Bring your son. The heavy oak doors of the study opened, not with a crash, but with a soft, funereal creak. 2 guards, not from the Imperial Guard, but simple palace attendants, showed the two men in. And then they left, closing the doors behind them, leaving the most powerful and the most broken men in Rome alone. Senator Cassius was a ghost. His robes were crumpled from his day of terror. His face, once red and boisterous, was a gray, hollow mask of defeat. He looked like a man who had not slept in a year. Beside him, trembling so violently it was audible, was his son, Caius. This was the young lion of the banquet, the arrogant, handsome brute who had grabbed Elara, who had laughed at her pain. Now his face was the color of chalk, his eyes darting wildly around the room, unable to focus. He had finally, in his short, pampered life, encountered a consequence. And at the far end of the room, behind his simple wooden desk, sat Marcus. He was not wearing his purple toga. He was not wearing his golden laurel. He was in the same simple brown tunic of a working man. The setting sun cast his face half in light, half in shadow. He was perfectly still. The only other thing on the desk, lit by a single flickering oil lamp, was the pile of scrolls. The small, neat pile of parchment that represented the entire, dissolved fortune of the house of Cassius. Cassius and Caius stood in the center of the room, like prisoners awaiting a verdict. The silence stretched, becoming unbearable. It was Cassius who broke first, his voice a dry, rattling croak. "My lord, Caesar." He took a staggering step forward and fell to his knees, his forehead pressing against the cold marble floor. "Mercy, I did not know. Whatever I have done—" "Get up," Marcus said. His voice was not loud. It was not angry. It was worse. It was bored. It was the voice of a man swatting a fly. Cassius scrambled to his feet, pulling his terrified son with him. "You are not here to beg, Senator," Marcus said, his fingers gently tracing the edge of a scroll. "Begging implies I have a choice, that you have a choice. We are long past that. You are here to listen. This is not a negotiation. This is a dictation of terms." He picked up one of the scrolls, the largest one, the note from Decimus's bank. He held it up to the lamplight, unrolling it slightly. "This is your house on the Palatine. This is your shipping fleet. This is your villa in Capri. This is your name. This," he said, letting the scroll roll back up with a soft snap, "is you." He gestured to the pile. "As of 2 hours ago, the financial houses of Syria, Gaul, and Egypt, all of whom are, by a strange coincidence, me, have called in every note you have ever signed. Your assets are frozen. Your collateral is forfeit. You are, in the plainest possible terms, Senator, bankrupt. You are, in fact, so far in my debt that I could, by law, sell you." Caius let out a small, strangled whimper. But Marcus continued, "I am not a slave trader. I am an emperor, and I believe in order." He leaned forward into the light, his eyes finding Cassius's, and for the first time Cassius saw the cold, controlled rage behind the calm. "Here are the terms of your surrender. You will listen. You will not speak. You will obey." He held up one finger. "First, the restitution. 90% of your remaining personal wealth, your art, your gold, your properties, will be voluntarily donated to the Imperial Grain Fund. The Annona. You built your fortune by threatening to starve the people. You will spend your ruin feeding them. Poetic, don't you think?" He held up a second finger. "Second, the business. Your companies, your contracts, your name in the shipping world, it's all forfeit. It now belongs to the state. The grain supply of Rome is no longer your personal weapon. It is, once again, the people's. Your family's name will be scrubbed from the ledgers." Cassius was weeping silently, his body shaking. Marcus ignored him and turned his gaze to the sun. "Caius," Marcus said. The young man flinched as if struck. "You enjoy being seen, don't you? You enjoy the power of your name. You enjoy the way people shrink from you. You enjoy making others feel invisible." Marcus stood up, walking slowly around the desk until he was standing in front of the terrified young man. "As of tomorrow," Marcus said, his voice a silken whisper, "you will have no name. You will be Caius no longer. You will be exiled from Rome, not to a comfortable villa. You will be sent to the imperial mines in Hispania. You will work in the dark as a nameless laborer. You will be given a new name. Number 117, perhaps. You thought a servant was nothing. You are about to learn what nothing truly means. No, please. Caius whimpered, sinking to his knees. I. And finally, Marcus said, turning back to the father, the moral component. He returned to his desk. You two will not go quietly. You will not be martyrs. You will not be whispered about as victims of a tyrant. You will confess. Tomorrow, at the first hour, you will both stand in the center of the Roman Forum. And you, Cassius, will read a prepared speech. You will confess to your gross corruption, your reckless endangerment of the Roman people, and your hoarding of grain for personal profit. You will apologize, publicly, humiliatingly. This was the final stroke. The public humiliation, mirroring the public humiliation of Elara. Cassius, broken, his mind shattered, had one last desperate question. He had to know. Why, he rasped, his voice barely audible. All of this for her? For A. He couldn't even say the word. Do. Not. Speak. Her. Name. The sudden, cold venom in Marcus's voice made both men collapse back. You will never speak her name, Marcus hissed, his calm finally breaking, revealing the furnace beneath. You will never associate your ruin with her. The world will know you as a corrupt senator who was brought to justice. That is the only story. She will know nothing. She will be left in peace. She will believe, as the rest of Rome will, that you were punished for your crimes against the state. She will never know that I was involved. She will be protected from this. That is my final and my only mercy to you. If you or any of your remaining friends ever so much as whisper her name, I will not exile your son. I will crucify him. The threat hung in the air, absolute and undeniable. Am I understood? Marcus asked, his voice returning to its icy calm. Cassius, sobbing, could only nod. Yes, Caesar. Yes. Understood. Good. Marcus turned away from them, walking to the window, looking out at the twilight. The speech will be delivered to your villa in the morning. A guard will escort you there. Do not try to flee. There is nowhere to go. He looked back, his face unreadable in the gloom. Now get out of my sight. Elara awoke feeling at peace. The emperor had given her 2 days of rest. The sharp pain in her arm had subsided into a dull ache, and the palace physician had given her a salve that reduced the swelling. For the first time in days, she was not rushing. She was making herbal tea, humming softly when her young friend, the servant girl Anna, knocked on her door, her eyes wide with excitement. Elara, you have to come. Now. The forum. You won't believe it. Anna, what is it? Elara said, frowning. Is it the price of bread? I heard the emperor open the granaries. That man is a saint. It's not the bread, Anna said, pulling her by her good hand. It's him, Senator Cassius, and his son. They're in the forum, and they're apologizing. You have to see. A crowd had gathered in the heart of Rome. The forum was packed not with senators but with common people, bakers, blacksmiths, mothers, and merchants. They had all come to witness the unthinkable. Standing on the rostra, the speaker's platform, was Senator Cassius. That mountain of a man who had seemed so invincible at the banquet was diminished. His tunic was rumpled. His skin was gray. He looked like a man who had no soul. Beside him, his son Caius trembled, his face stained with tears, staring at his own feet as if he wished the ground would swallow him. 2 palace guards, not from the elite but common guards, stood behind them, almost as a formality. Elara and Anna stood at the back of the crowd. What's happening? Elara whispered. Shuh, said a baker next to her. He's about to speak. Cassius stepped to the front of the platform. He unfolded a scroll with trembling hands. He looked at the crowd, his dead eyes meeting the thousands of faces he despised, the people he believed he controlled. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. A guard prodded him with the butt of his spear. Read, the guard murmured, loud enough for those nearby to hear. Aye. Cassius's voice was a hoarse, broken croak. He cleared his throat, trying to find his old senatorial voice, but all that came out was the sound of a broken man. Aye. Senator Gaius Cassius, come before you, the people of Rome, as a dishonored man. A shocked murmur swept through the crowd. Aye. He swallowed hard. I have abused the trust of the emperor and the trust of you all. Through greed. Through greed and arrogance, I conspired to withhold the sacred grain of Rome. I allowed contaminated supplies, rotted supplies, to nearly poison your children so that I could profit. Liar, someone shouted. We knew it. I manipulated the market, he continued, his voice taking on a desperate tone of confession, and endangered the food security of the city. I used my power not to serve, but to exploit. I am corrupt. Caius, beside him, began to sob openly, a pathetic sound. Therefore, Cassius continued, his voice breaking, as a first act of penance, I resign my seat in the Senate. And I surrender 90% of my personal fortune to the Imperial Grain Fund to ensure that Rome never again goes hungry because of one man's greed. The crowd fell silent. They were stunned. No one had ever seen anything like this. A senator, one of the untouchables, stripping himself bare, humiliating himself, destroying himself before their eyes. Elara watched, her hand over her mouth. Her heart pounded. She felt no hatred. She felt no joy. She felt justice. She felt the justice she thought no longer existed. So that's why, she whispered to Anna. All that confusion yesterday, the rumors, it was true. The emperor caught him. She believed it completely. In her mind, this was cause and effect. Marcus, the good emperor, had discovered Cassius's corrupt grain scheme. He had investigated him. And now, public pressure, the justice of the system, was forcing the senator to confess. She did not see revenge. She saw order being restored. She looked at Caius, the young man who had hurt her. He looked so small now, a weeping boy. He was not a monster. He was just a pathetic coward. Cassius finished his speech. And my son Caius, for his complicity in my schemes, has been exiled. He departs for the mines of Hispania tonight. This was the punishment of invisibility. The young man who demanded to be seen was being sent into eternal darkness. To Elara, this seemed fair. A criminal and his accomplice, punished for their crimes against the city. She had no idea that their fall had nothing to do with grain and everything to do with the bruises on her arm. Her innocence was perfectly, completely preserved. She was not an accomplice to systemic revenge. She was a spectator of public justice. When Cassius finished, the crowd did not applaud. They just watched. They watched in silence as the guards led him away. No longer a senator, but just a broken old man. A common citizen, invisible. Elara turned to Anna, a small smile finally touching her lips. The emperor, she said softly, with a sense of wonder. He truly takes care of us. She turned and began walking back to her apartment, feeling lighter than she had in years. The incident at the banquet seemed like a distant dream. The wound was clean. The world once again made sense. The new order settled over Rome like the silence after a storm. Hundreds of miles away, in the cold darkness of a silver mine in Hispania, a man known only as Number 117 paused for a moment to wipe the salty sweat from his eyes. He was thin, his bony shoulders ached, and his hands, which once wore golden rings, were now permanently stained and bloodied from the pickaxe handle. A guard, seeing no difference between him and the 100 other convicts, shouted for him to get back to work. Caius, the young man who demanded to be seen, lowered his head and disappeared back into the impersonal darkness. He had found his invisibility. In Rome, a thin, gray-haired old man dressed in a cheap beige tunic tried to buy bread at the market. The baker barely looked at him, taking his small copper coin and handing over the bread without a word. The old man, Gaius Cassius, the man who had once controlled all the grain in the city, clutched the bread and melted into the crowd. His face unknown, his name forgotten. He was a ghost in the city he had once ruled. 2 days passed. Night fell over the palace. In the emperor's private study, everything was as it had been before. The candles flickered, the maps were on their walls, and Marcus was at his desk, working. The study door opened softly. Elara entered. She wore her clean, press service tunic. She moved with her silent, professional efficiency. She was no longer bent by shame. Her step was steady. She went to the small side table, picked up the wine jug, and poured a cup for the emperor, exactly as she did every night. She placed the cup beside his hand. "Thank you, Elara," he said, without looking up. "My lord," she replied. She was about to turn and leave, as she always did. But she paused. The study was quiet. She was no longer afraid. She felt safe. She looked at the back of the head of the man who was writing, the man she had served since he was a boy. The bruise on her arm had faded, leaving only a faint yellow discoloration. "My lord," she said softly. Marcus stopped writing. He looked up. "Yes, Elara?" She hesitated, trying to find the words. "I was in the forum yesterday. I saw Senator Cassius. What he said about the grain, it was terrible." "Yes," Marcus said, his face calm. It is a strange providence," she continued, her voice gentle, "how justice works. That he was caught for his crimes right after—" She stopped. She could not say it. "Right after he hurt me." She lowered her eyes, suddenly worried she had spoken out of turn. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. He could see the unasked question in her eyes. "Was it you? Did you do this for me?" This was the final moment. He could have taken the credit. He could have revealed himself as her avenger. But if he did, he would make her complicit. He would stain the clean justice she felt with the dirty weight of personal revenge. He would break her innocence. So he gave her plausible deniability. He leaned back in his chair, a small, tired smile on his lips. "The gods have a way of balancing things, Elara," he said, his voice warm, almost philosophical. "Arrogant men build their houses on thin ice. Sooner or later, they always fall by their own weight. Cassius's fall," he paused, "was inevitable. Justice simply found him." Elara looked at him, and the last piece of tension she carried dissolved. Of course, this was how the world was supposed to work. The wicked fall. The good are protected. The emperor was not an avenger. He was the guardian of that justice. "I understand, my lord," she said. And she truly did. She felt a deep sense of peace. She stepped back, her work done. "The wine is as you like it." "I know," Marcus said. "That is why you serve it. Good work tonight, Elara." A simple phrase. Good work. The acknowledgement of her competence. It was all she had ever wanted. Not revenge, not power, just respect. "Good night, my lord," she said with a small smile. "Good night, Elara." She turned and left the study, leaving him in silence. Marcus sat for a moment. He picked up the cup of wine she had poured. He walked to the window, looking out at the lights of Rome glowing in the darkness. The city was at peace. The grain was flowing. Justice, silent and systemic, had been done. And the woman who had served him loyally for 20 years was safe, sleeping in peace, believing in a world where the system, in the end, worked. He took a sip of wine. The silent protector, watching over his home.